In today's report, a lawyer activist is calling for justice over the 1976 student massacre in Bangkok. Meanwhile, the TAT is aiming to boost domestic tourism in lieu of international tourism. Details on these stories and many more coming right up. Welcome to the Thaiger channel, and you're watching Thailand News Today, your Monday to Friday news roundup straight to your YouTube feed. So be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. In our first story, yesterday, October the 6th, was the 45th anniversary of the 1976 massacre at Bangkok's Thammasat University. And a lawyer activist now says he plans to bring the perpetrators to the International Criminal Court. The Thammasat University graduate and Rasadon Group lawyer Grisadang Nutjarat made a speech calling for justice over the bloody crackdown on anti-government protests where police and military forces blocked the exits to the university before firing military-grade weapons at students. Officially, 45 people were killed, some by lynching, but historians say the number of casualties was much higher. 145 people were injured and over 3,000 were arrested. The Bangkok Post says Grisadang has been studying the massacre and believes the case can be taken to the ICC. Having occurred so long ago, though, it is hard to determine the chances of the bid being successful. No victims have ever received any compensation or apology for the events, and Grisadang is hoping that this case being heard could lead to some long-awaited justice for these victims. Additionally, he hopes that bringing attention to these past events could prevent anything like that from happening again. He said that the massacre on October the 6th of 1976 was not a political accident, rather an intentional act by those who held power at that time, who wanted to massacre students that called for freedom and democracy. Former Prime Minister Jaturon Chaisang also made some remarks at a commemoration held inside the university yesterday. He explained that this massacre occurred not just because of the decisions of a few people, but was rooted in societal ideology. And he believes that the power structure that allows the killings to take place still exists, and that the upper class is largely responsible for what happened. He said they did it by creating hatred in society against students and poor folks and killed them violently. Such a thing still occurs in society today. He went on to say that the Thai people need to do whatever they can to ensure and defend their freedom of speech. The British government has amended its advice to avoid non-essential travel to 32 countries. The move comes as countries around the world continue to make progress in fighting the pandemic. Unfortunately, those countries do not include Thailand. According to the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Thailand remains on the red list along with South Africa, Brazil, and Mexico. The office advises against all but essential travel to the whole of Thailand based on the current assessment of risks. Meanwhile, the UK has dropped its advice to avoid non-essential travel to Malaysia, Algeria, and Senegal, among others. The move will make it easier for travelers to obtain travel insurance for these destinations, which would have previously been excluded from coverage. Having recently ditched its so-called traffic light system, where countries were on green, amber, and red lists, the UK has now just one single red list, where Thailand still remains. Foreign Minister Liz Truss says COVID testing requirements have also been reduced for fully vaccinated arrivals.
Well, just another quick excursion to one of the many islands you can visit off Phuket, courtesy of Sean Stenning from 5 Star Marine and his amazing boats. The water is amazingly clear. We're on Kok Kai.
Yeah, Kok Kai Island, or Egg Island, as we were just talking about. This is a set of 3 islands, a good small day trip for a family. You know, shallow water snorkeling, nice beach, and officially opening in October.
Now, they're calling this Cat Island locally. Why?
Because there's a bunch of cats out here. So over the last 12-18 months we've been coming out here and the cats have been playing with the tourists, so the domestic local tourists anyway.
Well, the only animal life here today is a couple of chickens, so I'm not sure where the cats have gone.
Maybe it's a little early for the cats, maybe it's a little early.
So how many islands are now open off Phuket?
We're a full 11 destinations within 1 hour of Phuket now, and in that multiple islands in every destination.
Just in the distance we can see Koh Phi Phi over here, and we've got Phang Nga Bay in the distance there, and Krabi not too far away. So within 2 hours you can see a lot of beautiful islands.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff to see, and very different. Phang Nga Bay is kind of like a sightseeing, Phi Phi is like a snorkeling, Kai is like a nice family trip.
Well, the water's magnificent, the sun's out, and the worst of the wet season's behind us. So come back to Phuket, come back to Thailand.
The family of a Thai man who was allegedly beaten to death by a Swiss man in Udon Thani say they believe the killing was over a romantic affair. In previous reports, the Swiss national allegedly told police that he acted in self-defense after the Thai man had entered his home wielding a gun and demanded money. But when police arrived at the scene, the 50-year-old man was dead. Rope was tied to his hands and feet. 63-year-old Swiss man Rudolf Joseph reportedly tied him up in case he regained consciousness and attacked again. According to Pattaya News, family members of the deceased Thai man say they believe this had nothing to do with money, but everything to do with an alleged long-term affair between the victim and Rudolph's wife. The victim's mother and uncle tell the story of the victim losing his wife and children as a result of the affair that he had been having with Rudolph's wife for 2 to 3 years. They say that the victim went to the house the night of his murder because the Thai wife had called him and invited him in. But once he entered the house, a fight began between the husband and the Thai man. The gun the Thai man had been carrying was legally purchased as a second-hand gun about a year ago. Autopsy reports show he died of a liver rupture that could be a result of the beating. After the initial investigation, the Swiss man was charged with assaulting others to death, and the Thai victim was charged posthumously with trespassing, carrying a firearm in public, and attempted murder. The Udon Thani police will continue investigating the incident and gather evidence. Perhaps not to put all of its eggs in the foreign tourism basket, the Thai government has now set a target for domestic tourism revenue next year to reach close to 1 trillion baht. While international travel is finally opening back up in Thailand, it is more than a trickle than a flood, and government officials are looking towards domestic travelers to pump up the tourism sector. In 2020, foreign tourism brought in 332 billion baht, an 83% drop from the 1.91 trillion baht international tourism generated in pre-pandemic 2019. Domestic tourism fared at least a little better, generating 482 billion baht, a lesser 55% drop from the 2019 figures. The plunging tourism revenue numbers strongly contributed to Thailand's worst economic drop in more than 20 years in 2020. This month began a broader reopening with softened restrictions and more locations for foreigners to spend their first 7 days of soft quarantine, such as in Krabi and Phang Nga. But there's still a long road to recovery for the massive tourism Thailand experienced in 2019 and prior. The Tourism Authority of Thailand is working to promote and incentivize domestic travel with a goal of generating at least 882 billion baht in 2022. They're working to increase the number of flights around the country, including more flights to the popular tourist destinations like Phuket and Chiang Mai beginning later this month. The TAT will also work with tourism businesses and destinations to promote domestic travel and offer incentives that helped bring 127 billion baht from domestic tourism in the first 8 months of this year. A deputy government spokesperson said that demand is increasing for travel during the high season as COVID-19 infections have begun to slow in Thailand, with daily cases once above 20,000 now occasionally dropping below 10,000 and vaccination rates finally going up. The government intends to continue to support domestic travel and introduce measures to assist the travel industry as it regrows. Since the launch of the Phuket sandbox scheme on July the 1st, the southern island has welcomed over 42,000 foreign visitors to its shores. So the Tourism Authority of Thailand has got the calculator out again, and according to the TAT's Phuket director, over 2 billion baht has been generated for the economy. The province had set a target of 100,000 visitors, hoping for both short and long-haul visitors. But so far, most of the visitors came from the US, the UK, Israel, France, and Germany. A reduction in the number of days tourists must spend on Phuket means travelers can now venture to Krabi, Surat Thani, and Phang Nga after 7 days instead of the previous 14. After 7 days at one of these tourist spots, they are then free to travel elsewhere in Thailand. In related news, Phuket's health department chief has confirmed that infection rates on the island are on the decline. During the past week, the daily infection rate has been between 170 and 180. On Tuesday, the province found 4 positive cases from the Phuket Sandbox program on top of the 175 local infections. The health chief goes on to say that over 83% of the island's population has received the second dose of a COVID vaccine. Officials are now busy rolling out booster doses, and the vaccination of students between the ages of 12 and 18 is about to get underway. He added that the first group will be inoculated between October the 8th and the 11th, with the rest of the students vaccinated around the end of the month. And those were the headlines in this report, but do check out the video that just popped up to continue watching shows on the channel. Thailand News Today will be back tomorrow, so meanwhile, you're now up to date on the Thaiger.